Hello, my friends. So, my university has something called sexual assault prevention training. And it's something that all students are supposed to take. It's an online course, it lasts about 2 hours. You're watching videos of certain scenarios involving some kind of sexual misconduct or some kind of potential sexual misconduct. And then you answer questions about it, and you're supposed to, I guess the stated goal is that this is supposed to somehow prevent sexual assaults. And I'm very skeptical of that, because I think if you're the type of person who would be willing to commit a sexual assault, a 2-hour training program is not going to change that. Because I think that basically this program is like training programs that I've taken for shitty corporate jobs that I've had in the past, like being a cashier or a sales associate. It's treating sexual assault and having scruples in that regard as if it's something as simple to train as working a cash register or dealing with customers. And that to me is so absurd that I just can't believe that the real takeaway, the real underlying lessons of this online training program are actually about preventing sexual assault. I think that there are a couple of more, I guess, fundamental and unspoken lessons that kids are supposed to take away from this. And the first one is the normalization of random hookup culture. Because this whole obsession with obtaining clear, explicit, verbal consent is so unnatural to the traditional dating process. It's so unnatural and absurd and frankly uncomfortable that the only scenario, the only context where this makes any sense whatsoever is the random hookup at some party or some bar or something like that. Because and honestly, the scenarios that they provide in the training program itself confirm this, because every one of these scenarios involves some kind of party or a bunch of people are there who don't know each other, and people are getting drunk, they're hooking up with people who they just met. And that is the type of scenario where there's uncertainty at every step of the way. You know, no matter how much you think a girl is into you, if you just met her, there's no way to be certain about how she feels about you. Whereas if you go through the traditional dating process and you spend weeks or even months getting to know a girl, courting her, spending time talking with her, expressing yourself with her, and letting her express herself in return to you, then these sorts of the progression of a relationship, of the romance and the affection that you show toward each other, this comes along in a very natural progression, and it feels right for both of you when you've actually gone through this process and you are, you know, taking the time to get to know each other first. And so half of the training program was involving this new idea of like legalistic consent, where you have to be continuously reaffirming consent at every step of the way, instead of just being able to feel and intuit how you feel about each other. And I mean, there were multiple examples that were just it boggles the mind as to how absurd it is. One of the examples was, if you're with a girl watching a movie, and say it's like your first date or something like that, and she's over watching a movie at your house, if you've been kissing and cuddling with the girl and she falls asleep next to you, they tell you that you are not allowed to continue to cuddle her or touch her because she is not able to continuously provide her consent. And this kind of a thing is like, it can only make sense in the wacko bizarro world of random hookup culture. And it's the whole thing is working within this logic of the hookup culture. So this first lesson, I think, of the sexual assault prevention training is the normalization of this kind of culture. It puts in kids' heads the idea that it's totally normal, that you're going to go to a party and you're going to meet some girl for the first time there, and then later on that night, you're going to get busy. And if you're going to do that, which you're going to, according to these training program and according to this culture that they're reinforcing, if you're going to do that, then you better make sure you have consent at every step of the way. And I guess that makes sense within this degenerate hookup context. So that's the first lesson. The second implied lesson that I think students are meant to take away from this kind of sexual assault prevention training is to always outsource your moral authority to an institutional authority. That if you witness some kind of injustice occurring or something that you consider morally wrong occurring, they tell you again and again within these questions and scenarios that you are not supposed to approach and handle the situation yourself. You're supposed to go to some kind of institutional authority, report it to a professor, report it to the university's sexual assault helpline or something like that. And not only to basically demean yourself in this manner, but to report things even if you have just a vague hunch that something wrong is happening. I mean, one of the questions was, a girl that you know has been getting anonymous love letters that are really creeping her out, sent to her email box. And you saw one day in class some guy copying down an email from the sign-in list. And so you think it might have been him who's sending her these creepy anonymous love letters. And so what should you do? Should you go up to the person and try to confirm or deny your suspicions by actually directly addressing him, asking him some questions, being a man about it and involving yourself when you think something's wrong, and making sure that you're not the one who's wrong about it? No. What you're supposed to do, according to this training program, is tell a professor. Tell a professor right away, even though you don't know for sure, you have no evidence, you haven't even spoken to the guy about it, you just have this hunch that something could be wrong, and you're supposed to get the institution involved. This is so ridiculous, in my opinion, that it's demeaning to people. It really is demeaning. And they reinforce this again and again with multiple questions where you see something that's going on that you think is wrong, but instead of stepping in and trying to handle the situation with as light a touch as possible and trying to gain the whole story before you make any real judgments and stuff like that, you're supposed to just go and involve the institution. And for a while, I mean, instinctively I felt that this was wrong, that this was just not the right approach. But I couldn't put my finger on why it was so wrong, why it felt so wrong, until I randomly re-listened to my reading of Friedrich Nietzsche talking about his prediction about the Jews. And one of the lines in that section is, he says, our self-respect depends upon our ability to make reprisals in both good and evil things. Our self-respect depends on our ability to make reprisals in both good and evil things. And that, to me, means that if you see something wrong, or someone has wronged you, or wronged someone you care about, then really our self-respect in a lot of ways depends upon our own ability to handle the situation, to be able to react in an appropriate way to some wrongdoing or something good. I mean, that's the other side of it, but that's not relevant for this. So by stripping students of this ability and trying to train them against reacting appropriately themselves, and training them to always externalize and outsource moral authority to the institution, you're demeaning them. You're making them smaller. You're making them weaker. You're making them really lesser people. And so that's why it bothered me so much. And I mean, the whole thing just shows how the modern institutions think that they are the be-all, end-all of society, and that individuals themselves are becoming more and more bug-like, more and more Borg-like, and they want to be the moral authorities in the world. These institutions want to act as the moral authorities in the world, and they don't want people to really have the strength to act for themselves. And I mean, this is the type of concern I have as well, just to bring up something else. This is the type of concern I have when it comes to guns too. Why is the Second Amendment so important? Because you, as a man, should have the ability to react appropriately to somebody who, for instance, has assaulted you and your property, or is threatening you and your property. If someone's breaking into your house and assaulting your wife, if you have to call another random guy to come by with a gun and stop the situation, and you are powerless to do it yourself, then, I mean, you're pretty impotent, and you're less of a man than the man who is able to actually stop the situation. So, the university treats their students like children, is what I meant to say. The university treats their students like children. They want to be the parents. They want to have the role of parents with the students. And I've said it already, but it's demeaning. And the idea that they think that they can train people to prevent sexual assaults is one of the most absurd examples of modernity that I could think of, that I've experienced recently. And so, I mean, these two underlying lessons, unspoken lessons that you're supposed to take away from this, the normalization of hookup culture and the demeaning nature of having your moral authority stripped away from you, being emasculated in this way. These are the two things that this sort of quiz, or this program, I should say, takes for granted and wants you to take away from it. And it's just a shame. This is what the institutions in general are promoting to people these days. So, I don't really have much more to say. Thank you for watching.